Hey everybody, welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo. This is episode number 95. For this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. While we've recorded several field guides devoted to singular years, tonight we're going to do a field guide to a city. And in this case, it's Detroit, Michigan. We're going to offer a tribute to the Motor City for all it has given baseball and music. From Cobb to K-Line to Cabrera, Motown to rock to rap. We don't intend to come off as experts on Detroit. Rather, we simply want to pay a bit of homage to a great American city that has built and exported so much more than cars. And my name is Gabe Estel, and I'm here with my co-host, Dennis Levi-Leach and Jonathan Gatz. How are you, fellas?
Excellent.
Good deal. Good deal. Welcome back. It's good to be back as well.
Yes.
This is, as we mentioned in the introduction, this is the first time we've done a field guide. We've done several field guides to different years in music and baseball. This is the first field guide to a place, and it seemed like it was almost kind of unanimous that this city would be first. You know, I mean, it's among American music hubs that are so important to popular music. I mean, Detroit's. You know, it's kind of unrivaled. You know, I mean, in that regard, just as, I mean, obviously people always think of New York and L.A. and Chicago, but you know, Detroit is just so instrumental to American popular music. So it was kind of an easy choice. I dare to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much to offer there that it was a great opportunity to even just kind of learn about the Tigers, that other team in the division.
Honestly, yeah. Like, that was the most, this is the most I've learned about the Tigers in a while.
All right, well, let's talk about Bless You Boys here, and go ahead and we'll get right in. We're going to talk about the Tigers quite a bit here at the beginning, and then kind of transition to music a little bit later. But talking sort of about the history of the Tigers, one of baseball's older teams. Jonathan can maybe start with kind of giving us a little bit of a historical view of kind of the best, the best Tigers teams, the best players, as well as, the stadium history up until, about 20 years ago or so, the Tigers played in one of baseball's more iconic parks, Tiger Stadium. So we'll talk a little bit about it as well. Got some things to talk about with the Tigers championship teams too. So Jonathan, you want to give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Reading about the Tigers, it's interesting because we're used to really their most recent success and the dominant teams that they had in the 2000s, making the World Series a couple times. And it's easy to think that, the Tigers have often been consistently good, and we easily forget about the years in which they were just absolutely awful. Like amazingly historically awful.
The fan bases, needless to say, longtime Tigers fans have been on a little bit of a roller coaster.
Yes. And so I was surprised to learn that they've only won 4 World Series in their history, and most recently in 1984, 1968. They've lost 7 World Series, twice in this century. That 68 team was led by starting pitcher Denny McLain. So 68 was the year of the pitcher, and because of like the height of the mound and all these factors, pitchers were especially dominant. I think I saw that the average American League batting average that year was .230.
Jeez.
Denny McLain. That was the year Denny McLain won 31 games as a starter.
Damn.
The Tigers were also led by left fielder Willie Horton, who had 36 home runs.
Yeah.
A very veteran Al Kaline, though he kind of had more of a reserve role that year.
Right, that would have been near the end of his career.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. He was the only future Hall of Famer on that team. And it was also the last of the single division league. So if you won your division, you won the pennant, you went to the World Series. 68 was the last year for that. And then that team also had 30 last at-bat wins. I don't know if that's the equivalent of a walk-off necessarily, because I guess you can have a win generated by your last road at-bat as well.
Sure.
But in the World Series, it was starting pitcher Mickey Lolich who won 3 complete games. And and it was McLean who actually ironically struggled a bit in the World Series. So that was a 68 team. The 84 team that won the World Series was led by Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker up the middle, of course. And
greatest double play duos of all time.
Absolutely. Kirk Gibson as well. And the MVP that year was the relief pitcher Willie Hernandez. Willie won the Cy and the MVP in '84. He pitched 140 innings in relief and was pretty lights out.
Oh. Guy named Jack Morris was pretty good that year too.
Yes, he was. Yeah, yep, absolutely. So yeah, the best players in Tiger history. I mean, Ty Cobb is just, of course, he's a son of a bitch, but man, he's right. One of the all-time greats. He's got like 144 WAR, which is just obnoxious. Al Kaline, Charlie Gehringer, Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, and more recently guys like Justin Verlander and Miggy Cabrera, of course. It'll be interesting though if those guys go into the Hall. Those latter guys go into the Hall if they'll wear Tigers logos on their hats.
I would think Miggy would. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the Marlins and the Tigers are the only teams he's played for, right?
Yes.
And the Marlins was basically maybe like 3 years, something like that, 4 years.
He won the championship with the Marlins, no?
In 2003, yeah.
It's a bonus question out there. Has any Marlins? Has there been any Hall of Famer gone in as a Marlin with the Marlins on their statue?
I'm assuming no.
Okay.
I don't think anyone. That's a good question, Levi. And I don't think any of the. I'll put this in quotes because 2 of the teams have been around for 25 years. Any of the expansion teams of our lifetime. Yeah. I don't think anyone's gone in yet. I mean,
there have been players that played for them that have gone in, but not.
Yeah, right.
Like Dawson. Like Dawson was a Marlin, but he went in as an Expo.
Right.
What did Randy Johnson go in as?
Did he go in as a Mariner?
I'm looking it up.
I would think Seattle. Yeah, I would guess.
No, it's Arizona.
Oh, he went as a Diamondback. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Huh.
So the Diamondbacks could be the newest franchise to have their logo in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't think about. I'd totally forgotten about Randy Johnson going.
Yeah, he was dominant on the Diamondbacks for a long time, but I just for sure thought he went in maybe at Seattle.
If somebody just walks up to me on the street and says Randy Johnson, I picture him in a Mariners uniform.
Yeah.
But even though he won that championship in Arizona,
yeah. Even though he had a very storied career, he played for quite a few teams. I mean, he played for half a dozen teams. You know,
I picture him as an Astro.
Eckersley. Like Eckersley will always be in an Athletics jersey in my head.
Sure,
like always.
Even though he played for the Cubs briefly.
Oh yeah, the Cubs, the Indians. He pitched for a ton of
Cardinals. Yeah, Boston. Yeah, but okay.
Yeah, so of course, anyway. Miggy will of course go in as a.
You would think
as a Tiger, but Verlander probably. But again, he won the championship in Houston, so if he can build a late career renaissance there, maybe.
Winning the title probably has a draw. I mean, we just mentioned Randy Johnson. Even though the 3 of us may not be like, it's synonymous with the Diamondbacks. That's where he won the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But and he also had several very, very good years there, and a bit of a renaissance.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Right.
So those are some of the all-time best players. Stadium history, Gabe, you mentioned Tiger Stadium, built in 1912. They played there until 1999. It was a pretty big joint, 52,000, which would rank just behind Dodger Stadium today. It was originally 467 feet to center. Eventually, they narrowed it down to 440.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
You'd really have to get a hold of one to crank one out to center there.
And then hope that you didn't hit the 125-foot tall flagpole that was in fair play, just left of dead center there. They had unique overhangs that jutted out the upper deck out over the outfield warning track, which would resulting in some unique cans of corn turned home runs. Outfielder could just be planted underneath it and it just sails in to the upper deck there. Really tight quarters there at Tiger Stadium. I was watching a short documentary on YouTube, and some of the players were talking. This guy is the third baseman for the Tigers, and he said that when the crowd started razzing a pitcher, maybe a Tigers pitcher was having a bad day, you could hear it pretty easily, and so this third baseman was saying that his pitcher was getting razzed pretty bad, and the third baseman said, "Hey, don't listen to them, buddy. You're gonna pull this out." And then the guy in the stands yelled out to the third baseman, "Hey, you ain't doing too hot yourself, buddy." So yeah, and as a result, a lot of players consistently ranked Tiger Stadium as one of their favorite joints to play in all of baseball. Year in and year out. The upper and lower deck bleacher sections were separated from the rest of the stadium, like completely segmented. There was a chain link, at one time a barbed wire fence separated the bleachers from the reserve sections. And
keep those heathens out of there.
No kidding, man. And
I enjoyed watching like the old footage that I watched a little bit while researching this episode. It's a beautiful dump that place was,
It's so strange.
How else to put it? Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the most unusual parts of it was the idea that those upper deck stands came out as far as the lower deck. Nowadays, it's a gradual, it's a gradual incline, but there it's just like one on top of the other. Like some New Orleans porches or something,
Right. It's a design feature that went out of fashion, I guess a long time ago. But I noticed that as well. I was like, wow.
However, one perk of that I noticed was that there was lots of shade. Like everybody had shade,
right?
Because of course the upper deck was covered as well, so it gave it a very boxy and non-sleek look. But a lot of people liked it, so.
Let's see a game on a hot summer day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you watch some you watch some footage, some old footage, and there was one section of that stadium that was not covered, and you could tell it could get pretty hot out there because I imagine in that box there wasn't a whole lot of circulation, and I think most of the dudes were shirtless on some Cecil Fielder home runs I saw going out to left field.
Right.
Tiger Stadium, rest in peace. Well loved for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of Cecil Fielder, Gabe, it's my understanding that might be one of your favorite Tigers of all time, or
he would be one of them. The other two were both backstops, actually. And one of them is a guy, like when you mentioned the 1984 team, I had to punch it in, his name in Baseball Reference. I was like, oh, was he on the 84 team? No, he was playing in 84, but he started his career in Oakland, which I mean, I would have been young, but 1984 was his rookie year. And he started out in Oakland before he came to Detroit. But his best years were actually he went from Oakland, a stop in Baltimore, and then Detroit. His best years being mostly in Detroit, maybe with a few good years in Baltimore. Who am I talking about, gentlemen? Anybody?
A catcher?
He's a catcher.
And his best years were in Boston.
No, he never played for Boston. His best years were in Detroit and Baltimore.
Oh, Baltimore. Okay.
Let me look.
Mickey Tettleton?
You got it.
I was going to say that. Yeah,
Yep.
It's got to be MT.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So yeah, he's one of them. So Fielder, obviously, the thing that struck me about Cecil Fielder, just to hop back for a second to what Jonathan was saying. You guys remember when he hit 51 home runs? 1990 maybe.
It was. I think it was 90 because nobody hit 50 in the 80s. It was the first decade in baseball history nobody hit 50, and so when he hit 51 in 80 or 90, it was like finally somebody did it.
Yeah. I mean, I was excited about that. I mean, 1990. I'm in the throes of collecting cards, and like that shit blew my mind that I got hit 50 home runs.
Yep. He had a very nice V Wells insert card in the upper decks that next season.
Oh,
If you remember,
right?
It was like the painting of him, and it said 51.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
God bless
He's
V.
one of my-
Wells.
That's right. Fielder is one of my favorites. I always liked Tettleton as well. Like I said, he actually didn't come to Detroit until he was 30, which I always think of him on the Tigers. So he didn't actually come to the Tigers until 91.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 91 to 94. So I think of him on the Tigers, but he wasn't actually on the team.
It was on Blue Jays, right?
No, he never played for Toronto. Oakland, Baltimore, Detroit, and then he ended his career in Texas.
Oakland, okay.
Yeah, so the
For
Oakland
some reason,
thing
I thought Cecil Fielder came in on the Blue Jays.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cecil. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was talking about Mickey Tettleton.
Oh.
Pardon. Yeah, Mickey Tettleton started off in Oakland, ended in Texas. Played for 14 years. Fielder, I think he did start in Toronto, didn't he? Because he went from Toronto and then went over to Japan and just crushed it over there.
That's right. I forgot about the Japan trip.
Yeah, because the
he
Detroit
played
thing was stopped.
He played in Toronto 85 to 88, and then in 89 must have been when he went to Japan, and then in 1990 he came back and was an all-star and runner-up in the MVP.
Yeah, gosh, man, back to back, dude. 90 and 91, second place MVP finishes.
Yeah,
that's
God,
his 80. I think it was his 86 Fleer. Was that the rookie that he shared with somebody? But that was one of my favorite cards. I think at one point it was worth $50, and that was my prized possession.
Right. Guys, looking at Fielder here on Baseball Reference, he played 13 years as well with that break in Japan that Levi had mentioned. I have no recollection of him ending his career. 1998, all the way in 98, wow. He played for the Angels.
Oh,
so
yeah,
he played for the Angels, and then he ended it with Cleveland.
Was it Prince and Mo Vaughn? Were they teammates at some point?
Maybe, right? Yeah.
So who had more career home runs, Cecil or Prince? I'm sorry, I said Prince. Cecil or Prince?
Well, I'm looking at Cecil's stats right now, and he had 319.
Whoa, Prince had 319. Really?
Let me make sure I'm looking at the right guy. Yeah, Cecil Fielder had 319.
So did Prince. Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Podcast's over, folks. Thanks for tuning in. That's a wrap. No.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing. No, that is really cool.
Although Prince had 18 stolen bases compared to his old man's 2.
Right.
You guys gonna have me on YouTube look it up. Cecil Fielder stole a base. Wow.
Right.
And go figure. Prince had 45 pounds on his old man too. 45 pounds and 4 fewer inches.
Wow. Yeah. My favorite Tiger is the guy we mentioned earlier really quickly, and that's Alan Trammell. And I don't know why, but I've always been a sucker for the up the middle guys. I think it started out watching Sandberg and Sean Dunston, and then of course at that same time was Lou Whitaker and Trammell. And I was always into Ripken. I was always into shortstops and second basemen. I don't know why, but
exciting players to watch in the field.
So I always just respected him. He seemed very Ripken-like in the fact that he seemed to go about the game and just, play the game the right way and, leave it on the field. And, you didn't really, there was no giant Alan Trammell controversies or anything like that. And so I always, when I would pull a Alan Trammell, I would always definitely set it in the little, I had a page of Alan Trammells.
Right.
When it was the days of you would put 9 or 18 of the same guys together all.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Levi much more success on the field as a player than a manager. He was the manager of the Tigers right before they got good. Because I think 06 was the year that the Tigers played the Cardinals in the World Series. And they were just I'm looking at his page here. Trammell was the manager of the Tigers from '03 to '05, and that's when they were losing like over 100 games. So he didn't have like a ton to work with then. But and then also he was the Cubs bench coach for a little while, Levi.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So Trammell lost the MVP vote just by 4 votes in 1988. Can you guess who he lost it to?
Oh, I know who he lost it to.
Canseco.
American League? Yeah, Canseco.
George Bell.
Oh! George Bell?
Canseco was Canseco MVP? Was Canseco ever MVP?
Ooh, that's a good question.
89? No, Henderson was in 90. I know that because I got the starting lineup in my office.
Oh, okay. Boy, now I'm paranoid. I misread that, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was George Bell.
He was the American League MVP in 1988, it says. Jose Canseco.
Okay.
Hold on. What am I reading here, then?
I think you're thinking of 87, maybe, Bell? You're right about Bell.
I'm sorry. It is 87. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
I was like, all of my youth has been a lie if Jose Canseco was not the 1988 MVP.
I got one more name to sneak in, guys, that because I was kind of bogarting the time there, but I Fielder obviously is a favorite. Tettleton. This is strictly based on my pursuit of his baseball card, Matt Noakes.
Absolutely.
Right? He was, dude, look at Noakes' killer rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's what made the card hot. I was thinking of this as I was researching this episode. You know, all of us were collecting cards around the same time, and the cards that were really coveted were rookies and prospects. You know, I mean, those cards were worth more than some of the superstar players just because you know that potential is so desirable.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 3 guys whose cards were better than their careers, right? Noakes, Van Poppel, Greg Jeffries.
Yep.
Those were like, I was looking for every card I could find with those 3 guys on it from like 88 to 92.
Yep.
And so Noakes was a hot item on the card show circuit. Everybody was like trying to get Noakes, just because he had such a killer year. I think in '87, I think.
Yeah, it was 87. 32 home runs, 87 RBI. Yeah.
Right. And then, other than I think like one decent year on the Yankees, he was never able to recapture it.
Well, his career was like almost a blueprint for Giovanni Soto. Whereas it's like they had such killer rookie years. It was like, it's really hard to live up to that, When you come into the league and bust out onto the scene like that, it's a lot of pressure for a young kid to try and repeat.
And put it as and the daily grind of being a catcher too.
Oh yeah.
Right? Oh yeah.
That's
learning
tough.
The whole pitching staff and
Yeah.
But yeah, he was definitely a flash in the pan, man. He was I remember pulling what was his rookie year? Was it 86, 87?
87 he received rookie of the year votes, so 87. He was still
it looks like 87 was like Noakes' like first full season.
Right.
Yeah.
He was still rookie eligible.
Yeah.
I have I have one. He's kind of a classic player from the 70s. So obviously it's just been more by learning about him than in the moment cheering him on. But starting pitcher Mark Fidrich.
The bird.
Yeah, the bird.
Yeah, man.
So it's interesting. Now Fidrich had kind of the season to end all seasons and this for all 70s baseball players, in that he became what he was able to do. He became kind of a pop phenomenon. He went from being a rookie to winning 19 games in 1976, including starting the All-Star game. And it was one of those things where if he was pitching, I mean, everybody was showing up, and it was going to be, I think as one Detroit sports writer called it, joyful madness in the stadium. And Fidrich, I mean, he would pitch complete game after complete game, 11 innings at a time sometimes. And with the big stage being a game against the Yankees that he won. And He was on the cover of Rolling Stone, and Fidrych was, most well known for his antics. In addition to his success, it was his antics on the mound. He would shout at the baseball as he was getting ready to pitch it, like telling it what it had to do, and he would groom the mound before each inning to cover up the previous pitcher's divots, and the dude just had this joyful abandon. I mean, he would be running around and just shaking guys' hands after routine outs, and he just absolutely loved playing and was just overwhelmed by the success of it all and the adoration he received. But unfortunately, he had an injury in that his second year during spring training, and he just never quite recovered. There's several comeback attempts, and he could never get it back. But he was, a cult icon. Or I shouldn't even say cult, because I mean he was absolutely in the forefront of baseball and pop culture for an entire summer. And I highly recommend checking out some videos of synopsis of the time, because just seeing what they call the joyful madness going on at Tiger Stadium is pretty unique. Yeah, absolutely. So
that was
Mark
76,
Fidrych,
right?
76.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Good stuff. I mean, the best Tigers of all time, Mickey is the guy that we're watching now. I mean, we've seen his whole career, and he's been playing in Detroit since '08. All those other guys, since I didn't really watch them play, like Al Kaline and Ty Cobb, obviously, they're kind of mythic figures. Whereas Miggy, we've kind of seen since the start of his career. But if you look at the numbers, man, I mean, he's a top 5 Tiger. I mean, he's more of an offensive powerhouse than Whitaker or Trammell were. Obviously those guys were more known for their fielding, despite being solid hitters as well. But yeah, I mean, Miggy's like, he's never, to my knowledge, he's never been popped for roids, right?
No.
Okay. Because I mean, his Miggy's lifetime average is 316 over 16 years. I mean, he's had 2 seasons. God, he's had looks like about a half a dozen seasons where he's hit over 320. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty crazy, man.
I think his lack of defense brings him down a notch in terms of all around Tigers, but offensive production alone, absolutely, he's right up there.
He's a Cooperstown, he's a first, in my eyes, he's a first ballot guy, so.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get to 3,000, though he's getting there a lot slower than people thought, especially considering how quickly he made it to 2,000, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's 35 years old. He's injured and was injured last year, so he's on the he's near the end. But yeah, he's a lethal, just a lethal hitter. Just about a 12-year tear there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was easily one of the most feared hitters for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so what do you guys think about? So the Tigers have always had a very classic logo, kind of the black letter D, and black letter just in terms of style, not color. What are you guys' thoughts on the steadfast Tigers logo that's evolved a little bit over the years, but stayed mostly the same?
Honestly, I preferred the logo that was like on cards. You remember like 85 Tops?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Tiger logo that they used from like 64 to 93. And it's just like the Tiger, and it says Detroit Tigers.
Right.
So like a little
circle. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good looking logo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that's got to be my top probably pick.
Yeah, they never put that on a hat or anything.
Yeah, and then right after that logo is when they tried to like combine them to where it was like
that was
like
ugly.
the calligraphy D with like the tiger popping out of it.
Yeah.
Right. There were a lot of bad
sucked.
teams that had to sport that.
Right. Yeah, that one sucked. But I like the fact that they haven't, aside from that circle that Levi mentioned, which I like as well. They haven't really, they haven't deviated from their logo and their team colors, too much. So I've always liked that. I always liked the cap that they wore. I guess it's an away cap, where it's the navy, kind of dark navy cap with the orange D. Mm-hmm. I always thought looked pretty sharp as well.
Yeah,
I guess that'd be on their away uniforms, I assume.
That's definitely a stylish one. I agree. Yeah, that's a sneaky classic color combination, Gabe. Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not what Tom Selleck prefers, not what Magnum PI prefers, but
right. Yeah. Just a couple Tigers notes too. The '84 team. Gosh, it's hard to say this, but the Padres were the team they beat that year.
Yeah,
in '84.
Of course, who did the Padres beat? Sorry, Levi.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, Levi. I'm sorry. Seriously, that I had a lapse there for a second, Levi. All right. Well, with love from Steve Garvey, Levi. All right. So, but it's weird to say Padres and World Series in the same sentence. Mm-hmm. But pretty crazy that they beat the Padres.
Yeah, it was. I was watching the last inning of that World Series, and it was awesome because I think it was Jack Buck who called it. He said the Tigers had gone up. Kirk Gibson hit a home run, I think, in the bottom of the 8th in Detroit in Game 5, with the Tigers up 3-1. That put the game kind of out of reach. It put it from a 1-run game to like a 4-run game, I think, or a 3-run game. And so coming up to the top of the 9th, like everybody's just going bonkers. And it's just a formality, Willie Hernandez is going to shut him down or whatever. And Jack Buck, I think it was, says, we're just going to let you soak this in with the crowd. And during the last at bat, they didn't say a word. And it was just like you just watched it and you listened to the crowd. And the final out, they made the final out, and he didn't chime in to say the Tigers have won the World Series. He just let it ride.
Yeah,
it was amazing. It's amazing just to like be there in Tiger Stadium and not hear anything else.
Classic, like fans rushing the field scene too. When they won the series. Yeah, no, it was. It was. I watched that the other night. It was really fun to see that. A couple of Jonathan had mentioned earlier Willie Hernandez. God, that's kind of like a forgotten MVP, let alone a forgotten Cy Young.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, when I was like, oh, who was the 84 MVP? Jesus, Willie Hernandez. Mm-hmm.
He's a bar trivia answer that will earn you a drink or two.
Right. I mean, God, and the guy wins the Cy Young too. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, you talked about rushing the field. That's got to be one of the last World Series like rush the fields, because it seemed like that pretty much ended like in the mid to late 80s. Because
I think so.
They're like, maybe we should have more than 6 security guards for a World Series game. Like,
dude, right.
Yeah, I saw it. There in that footage, there was more manhandling of people running the field by the players than there was the cops. Yeah. I saw players taking people just like pulling them by the collar.
I mean, gosh, Detroit in 1984, was really kind of, the city was. It still is, but it was going through some rough times then. So
68,
there was a reason.
Yeah,
68 as well. I mean, that's it. Kind of, it all started around the late 60s. So so obviously, it was a city that they needed that win.
For sure. Yeah,
those 2 wins, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in '68, that city was quite literally on fire when they were making their run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another guy, that was not a household name, didn't get a Cy Young or an MVP that was pretty good for them was Dan Petrie as well in '84.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was like their number 2. He strung together like 4 or 5 really strong seasons in the early 80s. Yeah, it would have been Morris at the top of the rotation and then Petrie.
Sure. Yeah.
I believe so. One last thing on that 84 team. Didn't know this until I was looking at the rosters, because I always associate him with the 1986 World Series, and well, I think he would have been playing with them in '86. But who played third base for the Tigers that year in '84? Anybody? Anybody know?
Shit. Hold on.
He would have been young. He would have been like maybe like his second or third year in the league.
Yeah. I'll get it here in a second.
I'll give you a hint. He's a once mighty hotel chain. He shares the name.
Hojo.
Howard Johnson.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yes.
Hojo.
Yes.
Yeah, Hojo was on that Tigers team.
I always think of
84.
Howard Johnson as a Met.
Same here.
Yeah.
Because I think he was on the '86 Mets team.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, but he started his career in Detroit, and he was their starting third baseman.
Yeah. So Hojo got a couple rings.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
good stuff, guys.
Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think, who's their best player now? I'm trying to think of like where the Tigers stand now. Castellanos, maybe?
Oh,
Or,
Nick Castellanos.
Miggy, obviously. But,
Well, I don't know. Moving forward, if it's gonna be.
yeah.
I'll tell you that. Let's see. In the 2018 season, their best players. God, man, they had Scherzer and Verlander at the same time. Just bonkers to think about.
Yeah, right, huh?
Well, yeah, and couldn't make it happen. Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Did they?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't even come close. I mean, it was like a 5-game series. But in 2018, yeah, they only won 64 games last year, and I think they won 64 games the year before. So they've been going nowhere fast. Otherwise, yeah, they're let's see, their best player last year was Mike Fiers, then Nick Castellanos, and then Jose Iglesias. They do not have much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they can turn that around. Well, they're in my division. So
Yeah, somebody has to lose.
I don't want them to get good that soon. But anyway, but yeah, so fun history to cover there with the Tigers. And
Sure thing.
kind of moving on to one of the other things that Detroit is famous for, not only making Thunderbirds but making records as well.
They've made a few.
They made a few. Yeah, it's a city that's kind of important to popular music, to say the least. So I want to talk about that now. Moving on to the history of Detroit music, and talked about this a little bit in the introduction, but I think for American pop music, it might be the country's most important city. New York and LA are always, and San Francisco are always, they're so big, and that's kind of, we always think about things happening there. But they owned the decade of the 60s. Detroit did. It's just it's pretty unprecedented, and not to mention not only the label Motown being there, but all of the musicians that were from the city where the records were being made. Obviously musicians from all over traveled to New York, or they traveled to LA, or in the 60s, they traveled to San Francisco, or if you're country, you go to Nashville, or, like with Detroit, like it was so localized. That's what really stands out to me. You look at the Motown roster and all those historic names, look where they're from. They're all from right there.
Right.
That's
homegrown.
One of the things Barry Gordy talked about in an interview one time was that they took almost like a Henry Ford approach to it. They wanted it to be like assembly line style, to where, kind of like how Chet Atkins did it with the Nashville Sound. And so what started as an $800 loan, he got an $800 loan to start a business. So he got that building, which is iconic now with those 2 huge front windows. And it was originally I think like a camera shop or like a little photo studio. And he started his assembly line. And so, like, once he had started out being one of the main songwriters for Sam Cooke. And so that's how he kind of got his enough notoriety and clout to get the loan to start Motown. Mm-hmm. And so he starts churning out, the acts, and it starts becoming popular. Well, then, like, it blossoms into this whole, like, factory. Like, they have on staff, like, stylists, like, people trying to, like, design costumes for all the acts. There was, like, a house choreographer brought in, showing all the Motown groups how to do the moves and stuff. And, like, like, it's a really neat way to where, what they were doing on one side of town in the factory making cars, they applied it to the music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was successful for them, which is
Hitsville, USA, man.
Yeah. And so I just think that's really neat. And it's, that's the American dream right there, too. You know what I mean? Starting your own business like that.
And a part of me, used to kind of, Levi mentioned the assembly line thing. I didn't really get into Motown. Obviously, like, I heard the songs on the radio growing up, listening to, my mom listened to the oldies stations in the car and things like that. But I put it down for a while because, I thought, like, oh, maybe it is just kind of manufactured. But, God, the tunes are so good and the production value is so rich. I've really just kind of fallen in love with the sound over the last few years, even prior to researching this episode. So to me, the production can kind of go two ways. It can go, you can sort of not do enough of it, or you can do too much. But the production on these Motown records, I think, it's just so ear friendly. And it's just so well done. It's just quintessential American pop music.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we could sit here and just do the whole episode about Motown.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's that much of a, like, rich history there, and, like, I want to also preface for everyone listening, we know music didn't start in Detroit in the early 60s, and it didn't stop in the late 70s, but that's the period we're probably going to concentrate on the most.
Totally, yeah.
And Motown was cranking. They were in town doing their thing, and so you have the whole era of segregation and civil rights and all that, and so white kids across town are hearing these black records. And so then that's where you get Detroit, home of Blue-Eyed Soul. And so one of the first guys to do that was Mitch Ryder in the early and mid 60s. Came along, had that soulful voice, and started playing some of those, what were then, considered in some areas still like race records is what they were marketed as at record stores and stuff, which is crazy. And, Mitch Ryder, then, he had a hit in 1965 was his first hit. It was a song called Jenny Take a Ride. And then after that, he redid a Righteous Brothers song, which is funny. The name of the song is called Little Latin Loopy Loo, but one of my favorite things of the song is in the movie High Fidelity, Jack Black and his coworker arguing about who's better, the Mitch Ryder version or the Righteous Brothers, and it's definitely the Mitch Ryder version, but regardless. Then in 66, Devil with a Blue Dress song, Good Golly Miss Molly, was like a giant hit for him, and
he's just belting it out on those.
Oh yeah. Too, man. He's one of those guys though where you would think after that, like, his career would have just been like boom, and it was kind of the opposite. Like, he went downhill, and he did make a record with a band that he put together in 1971 called Detroit. That's the name of the band, and it's the name of the record. It's self-titled, and it's not a bad record. You know what I mean? I hate to say it, because he's still out and performing and stuff, and I have no idea what he sounds like or anything, but The Detroit record would be kind of what I would call his last gasp as like a featured major label recording artist. And so it's pretty good though. If you go back and listen to it, there are songs on it that are not bad at all. And the one that became an actual hit off of it on the radio, a minor hit, was he covered Rock and Roll by Velvet Underground.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, their version on that was a minor hit on the charts. And so Mitch Ryder then leads you right into the next guy. Born May 6th, 1945, but would change the world forever. And that's Bob Seger. One of my favorite Detroit sons. And
shit, we could do the whole episode on Seger.
Yeah. And so he picks up in 1968. He picks up on the foundation that Mitch Ryder was laying down in like 65 and 66 with a song called Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, which a lot of the songs coming out of the Detroit area at that time just have a great like lo-fi garage rock sound to them. And that was one thing that Detroit has and has always done well, is that type of a sound. And so Ramblin' Gamblin' Man becomes a decent sized hit. And so Capitol signed Bob Seger to like forget how many record deal, like 4 or 5. I forgot how many it was. But what's funny is after that first initial hit, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, it took Seger a while to get like back into the charts. Like
about 4 or 5 years or so. Yeah.
Oh, no like kidding. his next major hit wasn't technically until Night Moves, which is like 75 or 76.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So about yeah.
So like he went almost 6 or 7 years, but the thing is, those 6 or 7 years gave him the time on the road to like woodshed, because a lot of the songs that became like live staples and that are on Live Bullet were songs he was touring and playing in like 72, because his album called Back in 72, which really didn't have any major hits on it at the time, it's where Turn the Page originally came from. So like he was working his catalog up and getting it together, and then in 76 is when Night Moves hit, and then Live Bullet came out after that, and it was just like Bob Seger was everywhere.
Hey, he toured with Kiss a few times, man.
Really?
Like in like 74 or so. Yeah, 74, like before he became a headliner. Yeah.
Yeah, he paid his dues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He toured a long time before he got super uber famous. But then, 78 came Stranger in Town, and then 1980 was Against the Wind, and then that's when his sales kind of started falling off. He did have the Fire Inside, which I want to say that was like mid 80s, something like that.
Well, what's Seger's only number one single, boys? Here's a it's unlikely. It's not the Seger song that you'll be like, oh, what are Bob Seger's best songs? What's his only number one hit? Pop quiz.
Is it Like a Rock?
Nope.
Okay. It's got to be is it live? Is it a live cut?
No.
Okay. Noah? No. I don't know it.
Shakedown.
Oh yeah.
Lay down your guns.
That was a number one hit, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was on. That was
Beverly Hills Cop 2.
2. Yeah. That's his only number one, man.
And was it only on the soundtrack?
I believe it was.
Yeah,
let me double check.
So. He may have put it on an album, like because it was so successful. He might have tacked it on to one.
That was an '80s thing. They used to do that a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Soundtrack of Beverly Hills Cop 2 is all I'm seeing. There's a 7-inch single of it, which I actually have the single of this.
Yeah, it's from '87. Yeah. Crazy, man. His let's just say, with all due respect, he has better songs. All right.
So, a little behind the music on that. The first movie obviously had the big hit, "The Heat Is On," with Glenn Frey.
Right.
They approached Glenn Frey with "Shakedown" because he had the hit on the first movie. Glenn Frey didn't like the lyrics, and then he ended up coming down with laryngitis, so they gave the song to Seeger.
Yeah. No, even though we associate the Eagles with L.A., Glenn Fry's a Detroit guy,
and Bob Seger helped co-write. Is it One of These Nights? I think
so, yeah. He co-wrote an Eagles tune.
Let me see which one it is. Heartache Tonight. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Heartache Tonight.
Yeah. Which, if you listen to that song, it's like, I could hear Seger singing "Heartache Tonight." That's pretty easy to imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Seeger is a god in my eyes. So I mean, that's I don't have much to add that Levi hasn't already said. It's talking about folks, other Detroit musicians.
Yeah. I basically only got us up to Seeger. There's still some major players we got to touch on.
Well, it's his name is associated with it often, but because he was born and raised there. But Alice Cooper is from Detroit.
Okay.
But as the Alice Cooper band, the guys that he played with on his first few records, they actually formed in Phoenix.
I was going to say, I've known him.
He's always kind of been like a guy that people associate with Detroit, but he didn't necessarily kind of really cut his chops there. You know what I mean, so to speak, or cut his teeth, I should say. But yeah, it's a guy that we haven't mentioned that is we talked about kind of I wanted to put out the idea of doing kind of a Mount Rushmore of Detroit. Can we do that now? Is that cool?
Sure.
Levi, why don't you actually, if you have your choices, why don't you go ahead and I'll talk about mine afterwards. But so let's just do them 4 at a time.
4?
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. So just mimicking Route Rushmore, but let's put it in a very visible part of Detroit. So yeah, let it rip.
Okay. I would do obviously Bob Seger. I think. Oh, this is tough. Okay, Bob Seger, Wayne Kramer, and Fred Sonic Smith.
Okay, so those are 3. You're going to go with both of those guys then.
And then, so I pick one more, right?
Yeah.
We'll do Mitch Ryder. I'll give it to Mitch.
Good choices.
Seeger, Ryder, and then the 2 guitarists from the MC5.
Nice. Getz, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to honor Stevie Wonder.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Damn.
Good call.
And Iggy Pop.
Right.
And a musician I respect, but I actually don't listen to that much. But I really respect him and the quality of music he does, and also all the extracurriculars. Jack White. I'd put Jack White on there.
Yeah.
And Ray Parker Jr., of course.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, if we talk about recent years with rock, obviously people are going to think of that one guy, Kid Rock, but they'll also think about Jack White. And as I was doing some research on Mitch Ryder, I would love to hear Jack White cover Mitch Ryder songs. You know what I mean? Because it's almost he's almost a oh gosh, I don't know. He's like Mitch Ryder with kind of more eclectic taste. You know, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but that's a good choice. Well, I've got to go with sort of the godfather of the sound for my Mount Rushmore. I got to go with Berry Gordy as even though if I can go sort of non-musician, I want him, just he's got to be up there just for all of his contributions. I'm going to go with Aretha.
Good. Yeah.
putting
We
Aretha.
need a lady on there.
I think we need more than one.
We
Yeah.
need more than one. Yeah, like my honorable mention list is about 20 people deep. All right, so
I'll take down Ray. I'll put up Diana Ross. Just
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. I felt like the Ray Parker Jr., with all due respect to Ray, was a little in jest. So so yeah, Berry Gordy, Aretha. You know, my other two were Seeger and Stevie Wonder, right? Which, you know, you guys have already cited those. So yeah, but yeah, so Berry Gordy, Seeger, Stevie Wonder, and Aretha for me.
Nice.
You know, one guy we haven't mentioned as well that made my honorable mention list would be Smokey Robinson as well.
Sure.
Yeah. And also another guy, for one, I love Levi. So I musicians with the name Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops would also be an honorable mention. He was their lead vocalist. Yeah. And then, you know, Temptations as well. Eddie Kendricks was great. Yeah. So good stuff.
It could be a big Mount Rushmore, no doubt.
It really could.
Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff there. And then, you know, with more recent music of Detroit, you know, the obviously when you mention Detroit music now, people are going to think of Eminem, and people are going to think of Kid Rock, unfortunately, and then also Jack White. You know, and all those folks, you know, they're part of the story of Detroit, even though, if I'm not mistaken, Kid Rock is from the suburbs, I think. I had to throw in that dig, but anyway. Sorry, couldn't help but mention it, Bob Ritchie. So yeah, but the even harder to talk about than Kid Rock is another guy that actually spent his teenage years in the Chicago suburbs. I didn't know that he went to high school, I think, in Arlington Heights. But you know, and it's even hard to say this just because he's been so awful in recent years, but like, you know, like Nugent's like 75 to 80. I mean, his stuff smokes, you know? I mean, like,
oh, dude, the guy could play guitar like a motherfucker.
Like,
Ted Nugent,
yeah,
just to be
Ted Nugent. I mean, it's tough to even like to the point where like now, like I even like, if I hear one of his tunes, like I almost feel guilty enjoying it just because he's such a blowhard, you know what I mean? But I've got a few bootlegs from like, you know, like I think one I've got is from like 75. I've got another one from like 78, and then another one from 80. I mean, his band, you know, with Derek St. Holmes.
Oh yeah, they were
just fucking on fire. And they jam like I've got like Great White Buffaloes, and they all like sound kind of different on those bootlegs as well, you know? So he was such a fluid player. It's just, you know, now you think of him and it's just all of his idiocy just overshadows the playing, you know? I mean, it got to the point where like, you know, like 10 years ago or so, you're just like, oh, all right. Like it's hard to even talk about his music now just because he's awful.
And just to be clear, it takes a lot. Like a lot of times you'll hear somebody complain, "Oh, I can't believe this, you know, actor or musician spoke out about this thing. I'm not going to consume their thing anymore."
Yeah,
like
right.
It's not just that; it's an extreme version.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
right. Like he's like blatantly racist, right?
Yeah,
I mean, let's just. Yeah, he's kind of an awful human being.
Yeah, and he has a history too from the 70s, right? Of being kind of a predator, a little
underage girl. Yeah, he's an awful human being, and I mean, granted, you know, it's
So we're not just being snowflakes here.
Yeah, right.
He just did it for the Wang Dang Sweet Poon Tang, guys. I mean, gosh.
Yeah, I mean, he's like I said, it's to the point where now you just it's hard for me to even enjoy the music of his that I did dig, because I mean, God, I mean, Great White Buffalo is a ripping song. I mean, you know, what a riff. I mean, you know, down. But yeah, it's to the thing where now I'm like, I just like I can't stomach it. You know, it's like just you know, because I mean, you put that before the music. You know, like transfer over to baseball, right? I don't think of Curt Schilling as a great pitcher. I think of him as a right-wing blowhard. You know what I mean? And that's like kind of applied to Nugent as well, even more extreme. Like
I have the same, like, I grew up listening. My parents had like all the Hank Jr. records.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing.
Hank Jr.
Yeah, you know,
right,
same thing. Like he just makes me cringe so much now that like, and I you know, Hank Jr.'s, if you're just exclusively like remove the person from the music, you know, I mean, I like old Bo Cephas's old stuff, man, you know, but like then you like hear him now like talk about politics and you're like, oh, he's gross, you know. I mean, and it's not just like I disagree with his opinions, you know what I mean? Like it's more like, oh, he's like pretty awful, you know. It's not just these aren't just like, you know, he's just a Republican or something like that. It's he's one of those Republicans like Ted Nugent. Yeah, it's too bad. And you know, like I kind of like was sort of like, God, do I even bring up Nugent, you know? But like he's part of the areas.
Yeah, Motor City Madman. We had to at least mention him.
And that Motor City lineage is a little misleading too.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like Kid Rock because he was raised in the Detroit suburbs.
Yeah.
And then he spent his high school years in the Chicago suburbs, and then I assume he just kind of maybe hopped back and forth between Chicago and Detroit. I don't know. But you know, him and Kid Rock are, what do you know, they're both kind of posers, all right? So, anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm going to talk really quick about a super influential band to come out of there. And around, you know, the same era as Mitch Ryder and Bob Seger there in the late 60s, and that's the MC5.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
One of the only full band to show up at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago and play at Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
They played for almost 9 hours straight. Supposedly, Neil Young showed up, but saw what a fucking shit show it was and was like, I'm not playing. And so, yeah, like there was like a full day's bill of artists that were supposed to play. And the MC5 were the only people that
they just didn't get on the stage.
Right.
Yeah. So
good deal.
Yeah, I mean,
thank God they've earned my respect there. You know, right, I mean, I don't even have to hear their music.
That was in '68, and their debut, "Kick Out the Jams," didn't come out until '69. So it was in an era where they were pretty much purely just known off of their live show. Which I guess, you know, if you've watched any footage of the MC5, there's clips on the YouTube. You know, each show looked like controlled chaos or what, you know,
with John Sinclair as the conductor, you know,
right? Yeah. And there's a really neat set of clips where they played. It's called Tartar Field in Detroit in 1970, and it's black and white. And yeah, man, it's like you could tell it's like one of those free shows at a park, or like it's this Tartar Field to where it's like everyone's there. There's black kids, there's white kids. It's like the crowd is huge and they're just doing their thing, going crazy. And I mentioned earlier Fred Sonic Smith, and then the other guitarist is Wayne Kramer, and those two guys basically laid the groundwork for punk music,
pretty much.
You know, with that. What they said what their goal was that they liked basically anything fast and anything that really rocked, and like that's why they like went towards that like early 50s era rock, because you know, just the da 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 da, and so it's cool to think that punk is based off of 50s rock. You know what I mean?
It is. Sure. Yeah.
And so they were big enough to have 3 records, which isn't very many for bands at that time, because, you know, they only stayed together till what, like 72, I think, do you guys know? I think the MC5 was only together, they weren't together very
short
long
tenure, yeah.
3 studio records, and then they were done, and, yeah, I just think they were really cool in that aspect, and that they influenced so many people
Yeah,
definitely.
That first run went to 72.
Did it?
Okay.
Yeah, 72. So yeah, in that same sound of that garage rock type of sound that Detroit does so well is another band I'm going to mention really quick called Frigid Pink. And not everybody knows about them. They're not a household name. But in 1970, they came out with a self-titled record, and they covered House of the Rising Sun, and it's just a killer garage rock version of it, if you've never heard it. And lastly, my last favorite band out of Detroit is the Romantics, which is a band from the late 70s, early 80s that sounds like an old band. Go figure. That's
Wow.
that's kind of my thing, I guess. I like bands that are old or that sound old. But yeah, they obviously had a couple radio hits with What I Like About You and what is it? The Secrets That You Keep.
That You Keep. Yeah, that was from '83. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was the bigger, I think it might have been the bigger hit, like on the charts.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely prefer What I Like About You over if we're picking their singles.
It's a ripping song. One artist that I haven't heard any of us mention yet that is, I always heard her name, but I didn't kind of know, how sort of important she was until recently. I don't know if you guys did listen to any Suzi Quatro.
Yeah, this week.
While you were researching this episode. But yeah, good stuff. It's a female bass player, and it also had a little bit of definitely like a garage rock kind of feel to it, but also a little swingier, a little bit poppier as well. Not too much, but it kind of had a '50s vibe with it. I don't know if she was friends with like the Dolls, the New York Dolls, or anything like that. But I could see them as a double bill. Like her and Johnny Thunder seem like they would have an appreciation of a lot of they kind of want to punk out a lot of '50s artists, sort of thing. So yeah, I enjoyed listening to Suzi Quatro, who's still touring as well. I believe still putting out records too. So
I listened to that the Pleasure Seekers album, which was her band in the '60s, and that is amazingly kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah, yeah, she's important. I have to admit, I'd always heard the name, but then when I started reading up on her, definitely, a Detroit music hero, really.
My daughter. That's how we spell her shorthand name. Suzi,
okay.
Suzi.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Homage.
Yeah. Killer tour in '74, man. It was very early Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult, and Suzi Quatro.
Whoa, awesome.
That would have been a good bill. Wow.
Oh yeah, man.
Oh, one more act I was going to mention from Motown, and it was Motown experimented with like white acts.
Yeah.
And so their most successful experiment was a band called Rare Earth.
Yep. Good stuff.
And like I would put them in the same vein as like a more funkier Chicago or like Blood, Sweat and Tears. It's like that horns.
Yeah.
It's like horns and funk, kind of Santana-ish with the drums.
Right.
But yeah, they had a couple great records in the late '60s with a couple
kind of Tower of Power, a little bit kind of feel. Yeah. Good stuff.
And a lot of people don't realize Rare Earth is from Detroit. I didn't originally.
I didn't know that until you mentioned it. Yeah. Interesting stuff there. A couple newer acts and I think she's been around for a while, but a really good kind of under the radar Detroit music pick that I wanted to share. There's a band called the Paybacks, and I don't know if they're still active, but about 10, 12 years ago when I had a Sirius subscription, I heard them on, there's a channel on Sirius, Underground Garage, which is kind of curated by Little Steven from the E Street Band. And there was a band on there that, I heard one of their songs that really knocked me out. They're called the Paybacks, and they're from Detroit. Female lead singer, kind of garage punk. They've got an album from 2006 called Love Not Reason that I bought after I just heard that one song on Sirius, and I still listen to the record quite a bit. Just a really good, she's kind of got like a Patti Smith-esque vibe to her, the lead singer. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing her justice. I don't have her name handy right here. But yeah, and I don't, like I said, I don't know if they're active or anything, but a really, really good record of theirs, Love Not Reason, from 2006. Check it out. Yeah, The Paybacks is the name of them.
Cool.
Along those same lines, I found, well, not along the same lines in terms of music, but just more recent, as a band called Majesty Crush that had a released an album or two in the early 90s. And yeah, I recommend checking them out.
Majesty Crush, cool.
Yeah.
Another band, I don't know if you guys have heard them, that from Detroit, that they certainly have a punk influence. I don't know, they get dubbed with the label post-punk, whatever that means. I guess that means denser punk, I don't know. But anyway, I guess there's kind of like, you could sort of say there's maybe like a little bit of a Joy Division sort of influence on them, I guess. I guess that could mean that. I think it's Proto-Martyr. Has anybody heard them?
Okay.
Or heard them? Pretty interesting. Levi, a band that Levi had turned me on to, actually right around the time we started doing this podcast, called Parquet Courts. They kind of remind me of them, Levi.
Okay.
It's got, I could see those guys touring or being on the same bill. Yeah. So Proto and then Martyr. It's I think you dig it. It's
cool.
It's thinking person's punk rock, it's pretty good. So yeah, that's they're a pretty good act that's come around in recent years that I like out of Detroit as well. So finally, I want to say one person out as well, kind of bittersweet. Eddie Harsh passed away about 2 years ago. And while Ed is a Canadian, he spent a lot of years in Detroit and lived there for a while, and he was kind of a fixture on the Detroit music scene before he joined the Black Crowes. So in the 80s, he was, he's playing with Muddy Waters and stuff like that. But yeah, Eddie Harsh as well, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll give a nod to a Detroit, great Detroit musician, even though, again, he grew up over the border. But he was always introduced, like Chris would always introduce him on stage as Ed from Detroit. And
right.
Things like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
I'll throw Ed in there as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
2 years gone.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Eddie.
Oof, absolutely.
Yeah. So good stuff, guys.
Man.
Well, yeah, we obviously couldn't touch it all. But
we couldn't. I want to say that, God, I almost feel bad even bringing up Nugent just with all those other people like I didn't get a chance to mention. I was,
did we say the Supremes at any point? Yeah.
God, yeah.
I think you said Diana Ross.
We mentioned Diana Ross, but got Martha and the Vandells as well.
Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. Oh.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I
Temptations,
did mention Smokey, but yeah. But yeah, God, the list just goes on. Yeah, I mean, yeah, God, Jesus. So anyway, this was a difficult one to narrow down to an hour or so. But yeah, you can tell us any Detroit musicians that we missed, or you can kind of piggyback on what we said and just keep some more accolades on all these great musicians that we mentioned tonight. You can follow us on the Facebook. You can also, I should say, like us on Facebook. That's what you do. You like. And then you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at Rock in Chew. That's rock as in feel like a number. So, one thing before I go, a friend of ours, mutual friend of all of us, Boomer, he has a theory. You know how Bob Seger said, kind of like in Rock and Roll Never Forgets, he goes like, like that. Have you guys ever heard Boomer's theory about how Seeger got that sound? Because he does it on Feel Like a Number. He does it on a lot of tunes, just the Seeger kind of belting it out, right?
Yeah.
Boomer's like, oh yeah, dude, they had the Seeger snake in the studio. So like imagine everybody sitting around the studio and they're like, man, I don't know, Bob just really doesn't have it today, And so Bob's got the headphones on, he's in the studio. Producer holds up a snake. Bob's like, So the Seeger snake, very important to the history of Detroit.
Yeah.
That's how Bob got the sound, folks. Thank you for that one. Yeah, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at RockInChew. Also want to remind everybody you can get this episode as well as any other Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Chew episode at our website, which is rockchew.com. All of the archives are there. You can listen to us on iTunes, YouTube, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. So until episode number 96, signing off. Had a good time tonight, boys. Hope everybody stays safe, and we'll see you again soon.
Peace.